Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. I'm here to help you create a great life by achieving a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. What I'd like to talk about today is why we get anxious in the first place. As I said before, there is a myth that if I have an anxiety disorder, there's no control, I just get it, it comes out of the blue, it's not related to anything. But the reality is that anxiety always comes from a source. It never comes out of the blue. You may not know where it comes from, but that's different from it just appearing. And the myth that you're the only one who has it or there's only a segment of the population who experiences it is totally wrong, because as a human being, we all experience it because it comes from the fight or flight response, which is ingrained in every animal species, including Homo sapiens. But we as humans are different than animals because our fight or flight is stimulated not only by external input, but also internal input, and also by memories. And that's really what makes us different. Our memories can serve as danger triggers, as what I call danger memories. And in order to understand why we get anxious in the first place, it's important to understand how these danger memories are formed. Because really, they're formed to protect us. But often, they're protecting us from things we don't need protection from, because the vast majority of our brain is finished developing by the time we're adolescents. That means anything that our brain stores in its data banks that can be dangerous, threatening to us, or circumstances, events, people, places, and things that could make us feel vulnerable, those are actually stored in our brain from birth to adolescence. So we really have a child's brain. We may be adults, but our base of reference is in childhood. There's been many talk about our inner child, right? Well, guess what? That's true. We do have an inner child, even as adults, even 80, 90, 100-year-olds. They are still formulating what they're going to view as dangerous from ideas that were stored as children. And it's, as we know, it's going to be totally erroneous, because as children, the world, everything is dangerous. And we make associations that are completely erroneous, but it's going to carry on to when we're adults, when it's stuff that we don't even know why we're getting nervous or anxious about, but it's somehow triggered our fight or flight response, and we're having it, and we don't even know why. An example, this is not even related to any continuing anxiety that I might feel, but when I was a child, when I was almost 4 years old, President Kennedy was assassinated. So I'm dating myself now, right? So that was in 1963. So you can run the numbers and figure out how old CoachMD is. That's 60, by the way, and depending on when you view this video, could be older than that. It was in November of 1963, and I was a child, and I remember. It's weird, right? 4 years old. How come a memory can be there? But my mother, and we were living in Washington, D.C. at the time. My uncle was involved in President Kennedy's administration, and my father was somehow working loosely around that. I'm not really sure. So we were in Washington, D.C., and my mother came screaming, and, "Oh my God, President Kennedy's been shot," not realizing a 4-year-old in the room shouldn't really be doing those things, but she was so distraught, as so many Americans were. About that time, I heard an ambulance go by, and I have to say that replayed in my brain over and over again. I thought that I had heard President Kennedy's ambulance when he was shot. Well, those of you who know history know that he wasn't shot in Washington, but in Dallas. So the ambulance that I heard, the timing of it couldn't have been related to that. But I have to say, it took me probably until high school, even though I knew I learned later that he was killed in Dallas. It was so stuck in me that I couldn't shake it. I kept thinking that I heard President Kennedy's ambulance. So that really doesn't address any exact anxiety or fight or flight in the future, but it shows you how associations can be so ingrained. And we wonder that why we might have more anxiety than somebody else, depending on certain traumas or how strong those associations are made when you're younger, may correlate directly with the degree of anxiety, the degree that your brain feels it needs to protect you with a strong, robust fight or flight response may directly correlate with the degree of danger that is stored in your data banks between birth and adolescence. Make sure to comment below some of the maybe danger triggers that your brain has stored from birth to adolescence, and maybe how that might be affecting certain patterns of anxiety that you may be experiencing now. Share them only because it busts the myth that you're alone, that you somehow have a disorder that other people don't experience. Again, the fact is we all do it. We all have anxiety. Because we all have a fight or flight response. It's ingrained in us. It's instinctive. It's automatic. It just happens, right? But it doesn't come out of the blue. It just happens because it's tied to something. And as I was saying, it is usually in humans tied to danger memories that we may have experienced from birth to adolescence. And I talked about in my previous video the 3 major danger triggers that exist in all animals, all animal species. The humans, us, are different in that it's directly related to memories and directly related to thoughts. Let's look at the one-up trigger. That's the first. What kind of dangers from birth to adolescence can be stored? So when we're adults, we can know what types of people, places, or things could represent danger to us. Let's say, for instance, the culture of our household was one of lack, one where we were always in need of something. We were always heard how poor we were, how those people were rich and we were poor, and maybe there was a lot of talk about rich people being bad or that, because that's what we're storing in us, that those people are one up from us. And what do we do when something or somebody is one up from us? We fight and flee them. So let's say as an adult, you are seeking success. You're seeking advancement. You have to go up against somebody who now represents somebody who might be more financially, have the financial wherewithal more than you do. And all of a sudden, you start feeling anxious and you withdraw from that. Well, anytime you feel anxious, it means that your fight or flight has been triggered, and it means that something's representing danger. It doesn't mean it's real danger, but in this case, it means that as a child, you learned that those people are dangerous and you need to fight or flee them. You need to fight or flee them by either bad-mouthing them, taking them down, or totally avoiding them. That is not the recipe for success. And that is a good reason why we don't believe, trust, or take direction from anxiety, because it's going to mislead us. What if, for instance, you grew up in a family where people who had a different body image from you were bad, so or somehow they were superior to you, then you're going to gravitate toward the body image that is not like them because you're going to fight or flee them. You're either going to, so if, for instance, you grew up in a household where obesity was the norm, then and there's going to be some, you'll see, there's going to be some overlap with some of these danger triggers, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let's say people who were thin or more fit, somehow they represented something bad or something. A woman once told me that in her household they were called the vegetable people, right? So they were somehow the vegetable people, but they somehow had a one-up from their family because they were somehow more able to do things or they were able to succeed in sports. So now as an adult, you start to find yourself getting more like them. Well, that one-up is dangerous. So it might trigger you to fight or flee that and to retreat back into a more unhealthy lifestyle. But one-up comes in all different shapes and sizes. We learn from an early age who's better looking than us, who has more money than us, who might be live in a bigger house than us, who might have the ability to be better, stronger, richer, more powerful. We learn that. We store it in our data banks. So as we're adults, we can reference against it. And if we're faced with something that's similar to that, we end up fighting and fleeing it, and we don't achieve it. So we don't, but the reason why we get that feeling is because our brain is trying to protect us from that. And we don't need to be protected from that. The second trigger, which is a real big one in childhood, and one of the major ones that influences our behavior as adults and why we get anxious as adults, is the unknown, the unfamiliar, the uncomfortable, the unexpected, the abnormal. We learn from an early age what is normal and comfortable and acceptable, right? And we learn that from the culture of our household. And as I said, there's some overlap between the one-up and the uncomfortable, but they're all danger triggers. They all go into the pot of what's going to form the basis of what we reference any experience we have as adults to what might be dangerous. So going back to the obesity example, let's say that it's the culture of your household where obesity is the norm. And it's acceptable, it's comfortable, and let's say you stray out of that. It feels abnormal because it's different. It's not what's normal, what's expected. Many people say, well, obesity is genetic. Well, there are some genetic tendencies, but most of it is familial. It's passed down. It's a legacy. And it's a legacy because as adults, we fight and flee the unexpected, the abnormal. So anything between birth and adolescence that becomes familiar to us, that becomes our comfort zone, that becomes our usual way of doing things, when we step out of it, it will trigger that fight or flight, cause anxiety, and cause us to fight or flee back. So that's the internal struggle. If you don't understand that, it may be one of the reasons why you can't get out of that cycle. And again, why do we get it? Because our brain is trying to protect us from the unknown, because in the unknown could be unexpected dangers and unexpected events, something that could really kill us or destroy us. That's exaggerated. But this brain, which I've called the automatic brain, is automatic and instantaneous. It will trigger any possibility of danger, not the probability, but any possibility of danger. It goes on possibilities. So that's what happens in the basis of why we get anxiety as an adult, because it's going to the unknown, the unexpected trigger. What about the loss of love trigger? Now, this is a big one, and I talked about in another video about how that really represents the danger of losing our security. And the loss of love is a big one. I recall when I had my boys were very young, and we went to a place called Gymboree. And in Gymboree, they had one of those pits where a lot of balls, you play in the ball pits. Very unsanitary. Nowadays, forget it. But, nobody's going to go in there. Too unsanitary. But at that time, everybody was doing it. My boys were having a great time. And another boy in the pit took some things away from a girl who was in the pit. The mother pulled out that girl and said to her, the girl was probably 4 years old, "Never, ever let a boy do that to you. Men will always cheat you and take advantage of you." Now, this is a 4-year-old girl. This woman obviously had some major trauma in her life, probably coming from childhood and then loss of love in adulthood. But now this girl, 4 years old, in her storage banks, in her data banks, when she gets anxiety as an adult, when she's going to maybe in a relationship with a man, and she's sabotaging that relationship because she is nervous about, or that person is going to leave her, she might do whatever it takes to get that person back so she could be secure that she's loved and that she has that to protect her. And all of this is very dangerous. There's some crossover with the unfamiliar, because now the familiar in her life is that men are bad. And if she goes outside of that, maybe she's going to lose the love of her mother. If she has a good relationship with a man, she may lose the love of her mother, which is going to make her fight and flee that relationship and cause anxiety. It all stems from the cauldron of the data of dangers that are formed between birth and adolescence. And when you understand that that's why you feel anxious, those are the first steps when you can start understanding not to believe, trust, or take direction from those instincts. So as these dangers that we reference to childhood and they start to show themselves in anxiety as adults, oftentimes it can lead to feelings actually of physical pain. Yes, we have behaviors where we actually fight and flee or avoid or self-sabotage and do all sorts of things, but it actually can cause physical pain. The reason why that happens is because the fight or flight response will cause that physiologic reaction, which is the signal of the hormones to circulate. And when they circulate, they cause vasoconstriction. What is vasoconstriction? Well, blood vessels throughout our whole body, they take signals from the nervous system. They either get smaller or they get bigger. For more blood to flow, they get bigger. And when they constrict, they get narrower. Well, what causes pain, what's been shown by certain research studies, is that when there is a small area of vasoconstriction, of tightening of the blood vessels, which adrenaline does, even though adrenaline will cause a lot of things to happen to help us fight or flee, one of the ironic things that happens is that some of our small blood vessels actually get smaller. And when they get smaller, they cut off oxygen. And when a muscle, let's say, stops having enough oxygen, it can lead to pain. There's a doctor who I've read a lot of. His name is Dr. Sarno. And Dr. Sarno is a doctor who was a doctor of physical medicine and rehabilitation. And he did a lot of work on this, a lot of very profound work to show that actually our emotions can affect our physical pain. And what I've seen in my practice and the work that I've done is that actually plays out. And where that comes from is our brain's interpretation of danger. And much of that interpretation, as we saw, comes from false associations or false experiences during childhood that we now use to make judgments, a lot of times unconsciously, automatically, as adults. And some of you have heard the acronym FEAR, F-E-A-R, standing for false experience appearing real. Well, that false experience really comes from childhood. We make up all sorts of things based on childhood associations or childhood perceptions, but it appears real because it's so ingrained in us, and it causes that fight or flight. And when it causes that fight or flight, it will cause those physiologic sensations. So often when I was in practice, patients would come to me and with a physical complaint. I would start to ask them a little bit of what might have been happening with them in their life, try to get at if there was any type of change that might have been causing them to have some degree of anxiety, because anxiety, again, fight or flight, danger, what in their life maybe was a perception that they were having that they were in danger, that they were being threatened or vulnerable. Because anytime you have pain, many times, not all the time, and in fact, again, I'll disclaim, go to your doctor if you have any type of pain. Don't just say it's nothing, it's in my head. Make sure you go to the doctor to check that out. But in my experience, a lot of times what you'll find is that indeed it is caused by some misperceptions of danger, threat, or vulnerability that is causing your fight or flight to be kicked in, to have a higher cortisol level, to have a higher adrenaline level, to have microscopic decreases in oxygen to certain areas. Back pain is a big one. The myth is that back pain is structural, but I have news for you that myth is also busted, because much research has shown that emotions will cause much back pain, and dealing with emotions can actually take that pain away. But again, go to your doctor, sort that out, and then if you so will, look into other aspects, because even if it is something structural or mechanical, dealing with the emotions and what might be causing your anxiety, understanding that pain, why you have that pain or increased pain, is coming from a cycle of fight or flight, will help you to manage it, maybe even help decrease it. And it could cause all sorts of pain, anxiety. Anxiety can cause neck pain, back pain, elbow pain, hip pain, knee pain, all sorts of things. So it's important to understand that why anxiety causes pain is to help you fight and flee a perceived danger. Usually it's something you don't have to fight and flee. The pain comes from that fight or flight response, which causes the symptoms of anxiety, which are those physical symptoms that you might be feeling. So why we get these symptoms in the first place is as a distraction. What you may ask why it would be distracting. I mean, why we get these, why we need a distraction, right? Well, if you, going back again, I keep saying this, but it's really important to really drill it in. Anxiety does not come out of the blue. There's always a trigger, and it always is considered a fight or flight response, the symptom of a fight or flight response. That's what anxiety is. So there's always a danger trigger. Our physical symptoms are anxiety symptoms, and they are trying to distract us, because then once we have the physical symptoms, we start focusing on them. There's one physical symptom which I forgot to mention in some of my previous video and this one, that is actually one that's quite severe and uncomfortable, and that's gastrointestinal issues. And it's funny because most people don't understand why we get butterflies in our stomach. Butterflies in the stomach, the misnomer is that like when we're in love, we get butterflies in the stomach. Well, not really. Butterflies in the stomach is a physical symptom of anxiety. And anxiety always comes from fight or flight. So if we feel danger in somehow threatened or vulnerable, we're going to get that. So if you see somebody who might be you're really attracted to, or and you get those butterflies, it doesn't mean that you're in love with them. It just means that you might feel they're out of your league, or you may be embarrassed, or you may be shy, or something that triggers that fight or flight. Also, sometimes we get nauseated when we have anxiety. I remember before track meets in high school, I used to, oh my goodness, feel like I was going to throw up, right? Some of us get loose bowel movements, okay? That's because, believe it or not, fight or flight, to fight or flee danger, we have to get rid of waste. So how do you get rid of waste? Well, you either vomit it up, sorry to be crude, or you defecate. That makes you more able to efficiently fight or flee. So that actually where it comes from, those feelings. But the reason why the anxiety, and it acts as a distraction, we end up focusing on those gastrointestinal symptoms or the back pain. And what that does is it makes us actually escape what the danger really is. What is the origin of these symptoms? I've developed a flowchart. I'm going to put my glasses on because I need them to read some of the fine print here. I've developed this flowchart, which is a flowchart of how the fight or flight, the anxiety symptoms cause a distraction, and why we can't believe, trust, or take direction from them, because they are a mere distraction. So what happens is we have all the data stored in our data folders from childhood. Now we come across a circumstance as an adult, and we reference that circumstance against that stored data as a child, and that signals danger. That signal of danger causes us to fight or flee, that fight or flight response, and that fight or flight response causes symptoms, tight muscles, anxiety symptoms. These are the anxiety symptoms: heart racing, feeling nervous, can't focus, headaches, feeling shaky, negative thoughts. That's what causes that's what's the result of this circumstance when we reference it and we have the anxiety. What do all those symptoms do to us? They signal that we're in danger, because they're very uncomfortable feelings. Our heart racing, our chest tightening, remember we talked about that, signals danger. So what happens when our brain detects danger, whether external or internal? It causes fight or flight. So it causes the next level of fight or flight or anxiety symptoms. Withdrawal, which is the inward or outward, which is the flight, okay? Causes anger or rage, which is the fight, okay? It causes it could cause feelings of depression when we withdraw. So all of those are the manifestations of the next level of the fight or flight, the anxiety symptoms. And what happens with that? That signals we're in danger. If we have anger or rage, or feeling withdrawing and inwardly fleeing, well, that reinforces that we're in more danger. So what does that do? It causes the next level of fight or flight. It may cause us to self-medicate, right? Drugs make us feel better, make us feel more calm. It might cause us to develop bad habits, to further flee. Smoking, drinking, those are the self-medication. Eating food as a medication. All of these things cause behaviors that lead to more alienation, which cause us further danger, feelings of danger. And whenever there's any type of danger, it causes us to fight or flee more. When it causes us to fight or flee more, it causes the next level. We seek medical assistance for medication to control it, because we're out of control. We go to a doctor. We feel like we're a loser. We have a disorder. There's something wrong with us. What does that do? It signals danger. We're in danger. What does any danger do? It causes fight or flight. It causes more anxiety. What does that do? It comes right up here. It causes us to feel our muscles tight, our heart race, we feel nervous, we feel out of control. It cycles around. It cycles. What has been achieved? It has achieved us to flee the real danger, which is up here. The dangers, which is in our danger data banks from childhood, it has caused us to fight or flee that, and it has succeeded. Our brain, our evolved brain, with all the glory of being an evolved brain, has caused us to fight and flee the dangers that are causing these anxieties. These dangers, which are really false dangers, fake dangers, if you will, that come from what we've developed from birth to adolescence. But that's why we're getting the anxiety. And our brain is very effective at helping us fight or flee that danger circulating here. Getting at that danger up here, the real possible danger, and where it's coming from, what's addressing that, and not believing, trusting, and take direction from that is the initial goal of understanding and why we can't believe, trust, or take direction from it. Sometimes it's so out of control that you have to block it somewhere with medication. And that's why it's important sometimes you need to seek a doctor's attention to block it so you can get at those dangers and address them if it's too overwhelming. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. Make sure, I'd love you to comment and share your experiences. Also like and share on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you haven't already, I'd love you to join and support my Patreon campaign, because this is where I can help develop more content to help serve you better. So until next time, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, wishing you a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable soul. Bye for now. Hey, Dr. Charles, CoachMD. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure to like and comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you think you have a friend who might benefit from this video, share it with them. For access to exclusive content, support my Patreon. There you'll get private access to videos, meditations, health tips, even relationship and financial tips. You'll have a say in what I produce and be able to participate in a monthly call with me. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you soon.